Hi there, and welcome to the CMOS, the CodeWave open source podcast and interview series, where you can learn about interesting projects, interesting open source projects from interesting people who are either using them or contributing them directly. I'm your host, Gabor Sabo, and with me is Tali Barak. Hi Tali, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
I'm really happy to have you here on the show because we met a couple of times and I've heard a couple of your talks. And they were always really interesting. So I'm quite excited to learn a little bit more about you and some projects that you're interested in.
Okay, cool.
Please tell me a little bit of your background, so other people who are either listening to or watching this video feed don't know about you. How did you get into programming? How did you get to where you are now?
Just like those actors and dancers that say that I didn't pick my profession, the profession picked me. I think I have the same story about programming. I was very young when I was traveling and stopping somewhere, and that was, I'm not that young, so that was back just when personal computer started, in fact. And I was standing by some girl, important to note, and she did like 2 lines of code in BASIC. And I still remember this feeling that I stood there at the age of 13, fascinated by what she did. And that was the moment that I realized this is what I'm going to do for life. And it was like that. So it's many years now since I started programming. I did that as a hobby as a kid, later on as my military service, which is compulsory in Israel, later on as my profession. But the interesting twist here is that along those years, I moved from pure programming into more management, product, UX, and other things, consulting for large firms about architecture, all those surrounding areas around programming. And for, I think, about 15 years, I wasn't doing pure programming at the time. So we are talking about sometime back at the end of the millennium, the previous millennium, that I stopped programming. And about 2.5 years ago, I got this urge again to go back to code. Few things have changed. I was doing some other things, and then I realized, why shouldn't I go back and start doing that? And I came back to a totally different world. It was because it was, and especially the two things that are different from 15 or 17 years ago, we can call them GitHub and Stack Overflow. That's the one thing that changed all the programming experience for everyone. The GitHub with all the open source project and Stack Overflow with all the questions that you just post your, God, guys, I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. And then someone says, oh, no problem. You're missing a semicolon, or you should just call it A instead of B or something. For me, that was an amazing experience. And one that I said, I want to be part of it. And since, which is for some time now, I'm, asking and answering on GitHub, on Stack Overflow, on various forums, helping with some open source project and that sort of things. So yeah, that's how I got here to be a programmer. Female, not so young, which is, I think, is pretty rare. I mean, it's not very common for sure. I'm not your typical 25 years old male.
Neither.
Yeah, I know you're not 25 as well.
Yeah,
Well,
neither I am
at least not for
25.
the first time.
Yeah. Anyway, actually, this is interesting what you said because it's a little bit similar to how on one one hand, and when someone is growing up, and then the people around that person see that person always more or less the same. They don't notice how the person changes because they're always there. And then if
Yeah.
someone sees that other person only once a year or once every 15 years, then you can suddenly change. How did you grow so fast? And all this. So you can see this difference, the contrast, much in a total different way.
Yeah.
How the industry has changed, or especially open source, I guess, but in general, the industry, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I started programming, we barely knew what is web. I don't think JavaScript was there to some extent. If it was, I think I stopped coding somewhere around 97 or 98. I'm not quite sure about the exact year. So yeah, that's we're talking about JavaScript 0.1 or something, or 1 or 2. It was
Unusable.
made in 95. All the web technologies, everything that was so uncommon. You would still write I was mainly in tool. I mean, C was there, C++, I guess. All kind of tools like Power Builder, Magic. You probably know the name. I don't know how many of the people that will listen to this podcast or videocast will know what we are talking about.
Yeah. Okay, so what have you been doing in the last 2.5 years since you came
Okay.
back?
Yes. So I was, because I wanted to develop something which is web-based and front-end. I started with JavaScript with very naturally. So I just worked with it, and then a friend of mine told me you should really learn Node and Angular, and cool. And a day later or 2 days later, I called him back and say, what was the names of the things you told me I should learn? Because I couldn't even remember. That's how out of touch I was at the time. So yes, I was doing a lot. I mean, I was mainly doing JavaScript, or maybe I should say just JavaScript. And I started with Angular, which I really liked. It was like almost like the code generators I did before, because it was so. At the first time, it let you hide a lot of the complexity. You could just go ahead, write something, and later on understand it. But in parallel, I did a lot of reading and watching of videos and YouTube, and going to meetups, and learning kind of other things. So I also learned about Meteor, which was like, yay! I don't really have to write a backend in PHP or something. I can just do it in JavaScript and quickly, and I have almost everything already connected. So and the whole environment. So I did the Meteor, and recently, and Angular Meteor is one of the projects that I'm still quite involved. Not so much in the pure development, but a bit of contributing here and there, some documentation, helping people with questions and issues, blogging a bit on it. And recently, the new thing from Meteor Group is Apollo Server, and I got really fascinated back again. You go to something and you say like, wow, that's really nice and cool. And so yeah, GraphQL and Apollo Server is like my last cool thing, and I do hope to. Right now I'm doing that sort of as a hobby, out of after hours kind of thing, but I hope it will go also to my in hours, real hours thing.
So when you are after hours, do you write open source applications, contribute there, or it's just mostly for your own fun?
Right now, it's for fun mainly. I don't think I have had something that I published. I think that I took some of the things that I did as open source and then used it in a project, but it was mainly like an high level. So yeah, right now it's still a bit for fun.
Okay, so we talked about a couple of subjects that we might talk about, because I know that you're quite familiar with quite a few of the subjects that well, personally at least I would like to know, but I don't. And so, for example, we talked about the GraphQL, right?
Yeah.
And you said that could be. So, what is GraphQL? I tried to
Okay, what
search
is
it.
GraphQL? That's an excellent question. And just before I go into, GraphQL is in fact a standard. This is not a software, and that's an interesting thing, because when you think about open source, the first things that pops to mind is code, pure code, and in fact, if you go into GitHub, which is like the not the only one, but GitHub is definitely right now the open source, the mecca of open source. You will find other things apart from pure software. And one example for that is GraphQL, which is in fact a standard. So if you go into the Facebook GraphQL repository on GitHub, you will find specs. And then you will find a lot of other implementations in different languages, in different servers, starting from JavaScript and going to Go, PHP, and you name it. I don't know if there's a Perl one, but it's up to you to check. So GraphQL is actually a standard that is sort of, I don't like to say evolvement, but more like another tier on top of REST API. I mean, we're all familiar with the REST API and Ajax call and how do you send the data back and forth. But it turns out that REST APIs have some great features and great value, but some big disadvantages. And the main one of them is that you're very, well, let's say the two main things is performance and documentation. Performance is because you are sending one request per resource normally, and you get it back. And that means that if you want few resources and to get some additional information about each resource, that will require you quite few round trips back to the server. And well, if you're doing that from your desktop with your 1 GB network connection, then I guess you're okay. Or even if it's 50 or 70 or 20 megabit connection. But the reality is that most of us use something else for a lot of browsing, and it's like this big device, which is not that powerful on one side, and usually have a worse internet connection. So the main issue here is to say, I want to send one request and get all the data I need at once, because that will be much, much more efficient, especially when I use mobile devices. And GraphQL describes some sort of a standard. It's a middleware that is standing between your client and the server, receive those requests from your client, mobile or web or whatever, and transform and send does the multiple requests and then return one response with all the data. So it actually takes some of the processing that you used to do in the client for combining data, merging it, and moves it to sort of a server or middleware. In fact, it's another server. And the GraphQL is describing a schema, what you should send. And the good thing about it is that that schema is very well aligned with what is needed in the client, with how you design the user experience in the client. Now, I know it sounds very fluffy, but the reality, I mean, once you go and look at it on your screen, how you describe it and how you send a query, how it is well documented, it's very easy to understand. And most people, I go, wow, that's really what I need. So I don't know if you are doing demos here or.
Well, I don't know how would you have never tried here, and can you share?
Yeah, we don't really have a screen share. So maybe we will I will just post a link to example it's actually a tool that is called GraphQL. GraphQL, by the way, is a standard that was developed in Facebook when they moved from the web to the native code back in 2012, and recently they open sourced it. So, and then we see some implementation, and one implementation is the one that is done by Facebook themselves. They also open source the implementation, not just the spec. And the Meteor Group, MDG, actually used this spec and developed their own version of a server, which is JavaScript based because that's their expertise, and is called Apollo Server. In fact, it's called Apollo Stack. This is what you will see in GitHub, and it has the server side and the client. And the main thing about GraphQL is that you describe your schema, you describe how the schema is built, and you use this schema to build all your queries. It's sort of, and I'm very careful here, it's like moving your ORM to halfway through the client. I think that's almost like it. And then you have all your schema defined. But the good thing, and this is what, as a consultant that consulted for large firms, what is really exciting is that you don't have to connect to a single server. You can, in fact, use this middleware to connect to multiple servers if you have in your organization, or even if you are a startup and you say, no, I am not this huge enterprise that have 10,000 of servers. But even if you're a startup, you probably connect to Slack and Stripe and for your payment, and then I don't know, and some other services that you use. Instead of developing them, maybe, you have payment, maybe you have something else for your billing and accounts management and that sort of thing. So you probably have some integration that you need to take care of. So, just go ahead, check it out, because it's really, really interesting, and I believe it's going to be extremely popular in the coming years. I mean, just like we can look at it as sort of some evolution. So first we had SOAP, and most people love SOAP today, just as long as it's in the shower and not in the code. And then we had REST, which solved some of the problems that SOAP had. And I think the next step is GraphQL.
Interesting. So if I understand, then basically, wait a second. So the implementation that that Facebook provides, is it written in PHP? So it's only the backend part?
The implementation that Facebook provides, I think I heard it was in PHP, which makes sense. I wouldn't bet a large sum on that, but I think I recall because I never looked at it. So Facebook provided a PHP implementation for the server, and then they provided a client side as well that allows you to quickly define the schema, not define, but use the schema, and this is called Relay. This is the part that I know better. I think their GraphQL implementation of the server is just called GraphQL Server. But I'm not 100% sure about that. And another implementation now is Dimitro, which is JavaScript,
Yes.
but there are a lot of other implementation. And there's actually a really great talk of a Facebook guy, which sadly I don't remember his name, but he was doing like 3 implementation of GraphQL in 30 minutes talk, and it was 30 minutes. So we did Python, PHP maybe, and JavaScript. I'm sure about the Python and the JavaScript. I'll have to double check the third one.
Okay.
So it's GraphQL in 30 minutes something, and check it out in YouTube. It's incredible, especially this trilingual guy who can just in 30 minutes write in 3 different coding languages. That's impressive.
Okay, so how do you get started with GraphQL? What is the minimum thing that I need to do to do something, to have something working?
Have something working is probably, the first resource you should go to is something called learngraphql.com. And this is it's JavaScript based, but it in fact is a great tutorial for I think maybe 7 or 8 lessons with questions and with tests. One of the best resources I've seen, and it will take you through understanding what is GraphQL to start with. It lets you play with graphical, which is the user interface for it. Sort of like if you want the Postman for GraphQL, if we'll take the equivalent in the rest world. And then in order to set up a server, it's actually pretty easy. I mean, you can take the Apollo server, which is open source, as I said, and implement it. But there's another cool thing, which is I know about 2 companies which are providing now GraphQL as a backend service. Similar to if Look Back or Dream Factory that provides you, or even Firebase to some extent, that provide you a full backend without you needing to develop anything. So they did the same, but they're providing GraphQL with a database. So it's assuming you go to a database that is local. They have 2 different approaches. One of them is giving you all the surrounding services. The other is more focused on database. We'll put them in the notes because I don't, again, one of them is GraphQL and GraphQL, sorry, it's called GraphQL. And the other one, well, if you want to find more about that, there's a GitHub repository which is called Awesome GraphQL, and it has all the resources, just like the awesome everything that they're doing there. We talked about what's in GitHub apart from just pure code. So that's another example. We have books. I think the second most popular GitHub repository is in fact books. Or the first or the second one is in fact books repository. And we have all the awesome something repository, which just give you the main resources that you can see on different environments. So there's also an awesome GraphQL there that you can go in there and check it out. And there you will see also the provider, the GraphQL and the other 2 that I don't remember.
Well, that's interesting, certainly.
That's a start.
And yeah, that's a start, and we are quite getting close to the end of our time for
Yeah, I guess so.
for this interview. So I wanted to really thank you for coming on the show, and I was wondering if you have anything else you would like to add that I haven't sort of asked you, or if you have a shout out to some people, or
Oh, I didn't think about that. No, I mean, go. GraphQL is really cool. You should go and check it out. That would be my very simple shout out. Right.
okay. So again, thank you very much for coming on the show,
Thank you. It was fun.
and I really hope that we'll get back to talk about some other subject because I really enjoy the way you present things.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye.